13576. Identified as bounty hunter Samus Aran.
Trilogies don't always end well. Oftentimes the concept loses steam long before the third installment, or the producers simply run out of creative juice. This appeared to be the case with the Metroid Prime franchise. While the first was a groundbreaking achievement, the second lacked the spark that separates elite games from the good ones. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is finally here, but does it continue the downward slope or ascend? If you completed the prior two Prime games, then it's no secret that Samus was infected with Phazon. This is what Metroid Prime 3 is all about. At the game's outset, there's a setup involving several supercomputers that have been infected with the virus, and it's up to Samus to provide the cure. But this is really just a superficial front, as the crux of the prose is really about Samus' struggle to control the Phazon running through her veins. Prime 3 includes a ton of voice acting and plenty of cinemas, certainly giving it a more commercial appeal.
Damn! They're targeting the planetary defense system.
At the same time, these elements don't completely invade the experience and rip away the feeling of desolation that has always pervaded the series. There's a lot of exposition off the top. The middle of the game settles into a nice Metroid-esque groove, and then at the end, things are tied together in a mind-ripping conclusion. While the bump in production values is nice, a lot of the dialogue is rather trite. There are a few slight twists and turns, but for the most part, the story is typical Metroid fare. You'll get a much more meaningful experience out of scanning and reading logs than watching the movies. The biggest design change is how you start the game. Instead of Samus losing all her powers, she's adequately equipped out of the gate. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't finish the game with a plethora of upgrades. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We don't want to ruin anything, but suffice to say that all of her classic abilities, and some brand new ones, are front and center and executed flawlessly. In prior Prime games, Samus would end up collecting a number of different beam types. Here, they all basically function the same, minus a color swap and the ability to open new areas for passage. To remedy this, an old standby, the Ice Beam, has been converted to a missile attack. Once you've collected a new beam, it inherits all the abilities of the prior beams, and therefore there's no need or ability to go back to the older armaments. Corruption is a much more neatly arranged package than the prior two games. Instead of there being one huge, confusing world, there's a handful of planets that the bounty hunter has to visit along her quest. The areas on each planet are much more compact and much easier to understand, especially when you're looking at the wireframe map. Samus' ship is used to get from planet to planet with multiple landing points on each one, and a number of other things. More on that later. Backtracking was something that received a good deal of criticism in Prime 2, and to a lesser extent in the first game. It's definitely present in Corruption, and it wouldn't be a Metroid game without it, but with succinct levels and maps, it struck a near-perfect balance. Where objectives are concerned, they run the gamut from investigating energy spikes, defeating certain enemies, defending allies, and more.
Make sure enough of them make it safely through this area.
There's a checkpoint system that's used, allowing you to continue your game from the last significant event instead of starting from the last save point, which helps curb the frustration. The game moves at a breakneck pace the majority of the time, but then at the end, you're forced to go on a pointless scavenger hunt that grinds things to a halt. It's a shame because the 4 or 5 hours leading up to this are some of the greatest moments in gaming ever burned onto a disc. There's little doubt that Metroid Prime 3 has been designed to make it more approachable for the average player. The backtracking has been streamlined, mission objectives are clear, upgrades to weapons and power-ups come at a fast and furious pace, and it's all the better for it. Clocking in at a good 20 hours of playtime, it gives you plenty of value for your money as well. The first Metroid Prime was revolutionary for its lock-on system, and Prime 3 should be viewed in the same light for its targeting. All the promise of sublime first-person controls on the Wii come to fruition here, and simply put, it proves that there's no better control option on any console. You can still lock on to enemies, but you can also fine-tune your aim. The default sensitivity is perfect. You'll be picking off the smallest of enemies from a distance with pinpoint accuracy after just a few minutes of play, and you'll never want to play a shooter with dual analog sticks ever again. It's that good. The one issue is the aiming reticle. Because the game is so colorful and frenetic, it can sometimes blend into the background, making it difficult to line up shots. This aside, the projectile combat is simply incredible. The other Wii-specific controls don't fare quite as well. You'll be doing everything from flipping switches to shaking off enemies, but like a lot of other Wii games, it has problems picking up when the controller is getting closer to or farther away from the screen. It can be annoying, but thankfully, it's not a huge part of the gameplay, and you're never under duress when you're trying to make it work. It wouldn't be a Metroid game without the Morph Ball, and Corruption gives you just enough of Samus's spherical form without going overboard. There are 4 different visors in the game, and you get the typical combat and scan shields, but there's also an X-ray visor, and most importantly, the command visor. This allows you to control Samus's ship, and you'll be surprised at just how versatile it can be. Not only can you call it in for bombing runs, but you can also use it as a portable save point if you find a landing pad, as a platform to reach new areas, and much more. You'll find yourself building a bond with the ship, which is something you rarely see in games. Swapping visors is a snap, and overall, the way Corruption handles so many commands with just a few buttons is worthy of commendation. In another nod to commercial viability, on its default setting, Metroid Prime 3 doesn't present much of a challenge. Most bosses can be defeated in the first try, and you'll rarely die from combat-related injuries. This is because of the brand new Hyper Mode. By holding down the plus button, you can send Phazon coursing through Samus's body, sending her into a vicious rage. The game's most feared enemies can be decimated with just a few blasts, and it quickly becomes a crutch to lean on anytime the chips are down. Quibbling issues aside, playing Metroid Prime 3 can be a near-religious experience. This is one of those games where everything comes together and just clicks. The learning curve is slight, the targeting is razor sharp, and the action is practically non-stop. It's almost assumed that more polygons, shaders, and particle effects make a better-looking game, but Metroid Prime 3 proves that art trumps all. Easily the most visually impressive Wii game, it can hold its own against any title on any other platform. It runs like greased lightning, never pausing or stuttering, despite whipping the poor little Wii's processor into a tizzy. Not to say it's not technically impressive though, it's pushing loads of geometry, all while displaying incredible particles, transparencies, bloom, and much more. It's one of those games that looks better and better the farther you go, motivating you to turn the next corner to view the next breathtaking vista. After a couple hours with Corruption, Nintendo's theory of gameplay over graphics will start to make a whole lot of sense. The original Metroid Prime is one of the highest rated games in existence, but Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is easily superior. It's far less frustrating and more action-packed, while managing to redefine console shooting controls in the process. Hardcore Metroid purists may cry foul, but for everyone else, this is the Metroid we've been waiting for, with literally dozens of set-piece moments that will grip you up, shake you around, and leave you begging for more.